Good afternoon. So, outline of my talk today, first of all I'm going to talk about a review that we recently published in Nutrition Bulletin looking at snacking, and then follow up with some information on a hydration resource that we also published in Nutrition Bulletin. In September of this year we published a review, Is Snacking Good or Bad for Health? An Overview. And this is available at the link below, so recently published. In terms of snacking, this review, the aim of it was to explore the literature in the area of snacking and health, and to summarise the current evidence. The format of the review, and indeed of this talk this morning, will cover what is a snack, some of the snacking trends, snacking and its influence on our nutrient intake, snacking and its influence on health, and some of the key messages that came out of this review in terms of snacking. So when we went to look at this information, we looked at all the studies that were available. We found that there's no actual single definition of a snack. Various studies have used different definitions, for example, the time of day or time since your last meal, the food or snack type, the calorie or energy or nutrient profile of your snack or food, or in some cases they've used an individual's self-definition, so what you perceive is a snack in your diet. So basically, in terms of these definitions, when you're looking at the literature, each definition will have its own limitations. So, for example, if participants self-define, there's likely to be variation across and between different population groups. In this type of research, it's also important to consider that predefined snack foods may also be eaten as part of a meal. And if snacks are defined by their nutrient content, for example, foods high in fat or sugar, that this may impact on any of the health associations that will come out of the literature. So when asking ourselves what is a snack, we need to consider what we eat traditionally. So it's traditionally 3 meals per day, with or without snacks, is part of our UK diet. But these traditional meal patterns may not be a common eating style amongst certain population groups, and our meal and snack patterns may be less consistent than in the past. So for example, the recommendations state that young children should consume small, more frequent meals rather than 3 meals per day. And also, when we're looking at what actually is a snack, the difference between a meal and a snack is getting much harder to define. So, for example, what constitutes a meal to one person may be a snack to another. So therefore, when we're looking at the literature and we see that there's a lack of definition, and there's also a difference in meal patterns amongst different population groups, then when we're looking at the research, it can mean that the research is variable. So in looking at snacking trends, in terms of the trends, it has been suggested that snacking has increased over the last 3 to 4 decades, and that it now makes a significant contribution to our average daily intake. So here I'm going to compare snacking trends between the US and the UK. And when we look at snacking trends in the US, we can see from a large population-based study that snacking has increased from 71% to 97% in adults. And when I'm talking about these national food consumption surveys, I'm talking about 30 to 40,000 people are involved in these surveys. Snacking has also increased from 74% to 98% in children, and we're talking about the period from 1978 to 2003. There's also been an increased contribution of energy from snacks, so from 18 to 24% in adults, and 20.5% to 27% in children. And also, in terms of the US, our eating occasions have increased from 3.9 to 5.1 meals per day in children. Looking at data for the UK, in a cross-sectional study, this is a much smaller study, so in 800 participants, so in children, there is no evidence to suggest an increase in eating frequency and snack intake and energy derived from snacks. There was a slight decrease in snacks and energy derived from snacks in 2000 compared to a 1980 period. And then another study in Northern Ireland, much smaller study, looking at 47 adolescents, showed that there was an increased contribution from snacks from 30 to 33% between 1997 and 2005. So we're looking at the data here and we're seeing that in the US, they surveyed a lot of people. In the UK, the data isn't there so much, so there's a smaller population in terms of the studies. But in terms of when you're actually looking at the UK studies, you need to consider the fact that the geographical difference between these locations and the small sample size may affect the results. So overall, in terms of snacking trends, in the UK we can see that evidence that snacking is increasing is lacking. It could be that we're just simply eating on the go rather than snacking per se, but in evolutionary terms, we're still grazers. Our grazing habits haven't changed. But there is a possibility that the energy density of the snacks has increased. So there the consistency of the foods that we're eating. The idea that snacking has increased and leads to increased obesity needs to be substantiated, and this is what we looked at in terms of this review. And we also need to consider the energy density, the food choice, portion size, options for food on the go, as well as physical activity and how this can influence snacking. And this is all needs to be considered before we can draw any further conclusions. So this slide basically shows some commonly consumed snacks. This is based on market research data where the snack definition was self-defined by the participants, and they're divided according to different food groups, so biscuits, fresh fruit, cakes, tarts, crisps, cereal foods and dairy. And when we look at these different types of snacks, it's important to understand that they can contribute different micronutrients and fibre to our diets. In terms of the nutrient intake, 1 to 2 snacks per day in addition to 3 meals can lead to a higher intake of all micronutrients than those with fewer eating occasions, and this has been shown in some studies. It is wrong to assume that higher sodium intakes occur with higher snack frequency. Research has actually shown that some meals can have higher sodium levels. For example, in foods such as cheese, bread and spreads, foods with sauces, chips and eggs, these have been associated with a higher sodium density compared to dietary patterns in which snacks are commonly consumed. But if you're looking at the sodium content, you need to consider the portion size and the types of foods selected. So when we're looking at sodium levels, we need to consider that more research is needed in light of reformulation. So in terms of the responsibility deal, where industry has reduced salt content of foods. But overall, there is no evidence that the nutrient content is more or less healthy than the foods consumed as part of a meal. So that's what the evidence shows when we looked at this review. This slide is really just to sort of give you an idea of the nutrient content of some of the snacks that I just haven't added up in the slide, to show that some of them provide more or less calories, carbohydrate, fat, protein, fibre, sodium, vitamin C and calcium. For example, fresh fruit provides more vitamin C and fibre. Cereal foods provide more sugar and sodium. Dairy provides obviously more calcium and protein, whereas the cakes, tarts and pastries will provide more calories. In looking at the evidence for snacking and body weight, it is believed that snacking is contributing to our obesity epidemic, and this affects 61% of adults and 30% of children aged 2 to 15 years currently in the UK. Some observational studies have shown some positive associations between snacking and obesity, while others have shown inverse associations, so different type of association, or no association between snacking and body weight. One study showed that obese subjects were more frequent snackers compared with those of a normal weight and energy intake, and that the obesity was found to increase with increasing snack frequency. In contrast, another study showed that increased eating frequency was associated with a lower risk of obesity. We're getting lots of conflicting evidence here. And a systematic review concluded that snacking may have some positive advantages for body weight control compared with rigid patterns of 3 meals per day. And there were also mixed messages in terms of increasing eating frequency and weight loss. So when we're looking at the evidence in terms of snacking and body weight, you need to also consider some of the confounders that can be found in these studies, for example, reverse causality, physical activity, and underreporting. And what I mean by reverse causality is that those who are overweight, they may have altered their diets, and so forth, in order to lose weight, and so forth, they may appear to have a reduced eating frequency or snack intake. In terms of physical activity, those who snack more may do so in association with more physical activities, and snacking can also increase spontaneous physical activity and may increase the motivation to participate in physical activity. In terms of underreporting, obese are more likely to underreport the foods they consume, the energy from snacks and foods consumed outside your normal 3 meals per day, and also these snack foods are most commonly underreported as well. Overall, the evidence is inconclusive that increasing food frequency and/or snacking contributes to weight gain or that it inhibits weight loss. The research actually suggests that food choice could be a much stronger determinant and cause of increasing body weight and obesity. So therefore, more research is needed before we can draw any firm conclusions about snacking and body weight. And when I talk about more research, I'm talking about sufficiently powered long-term intervention studies, taking into account confounders and within free living scenarios. Moving on to look at another aspect of snacking and health, the relationship between snacking and behavioural responses. So the influence of snacking on hunger, appetite, satiety and subsequent food intake is of great interest. So research in this field could potentially be used for effective weight management programs, for example looking at hunger versus satiety. The evidence suggests a weak association, however, in perceived hunger with snacking and or increased meal frequency have been found in most studies but not all. For example, one study found a significant increase in hunger when subjects consumed all of their daily needs within one meal per day. But obviously, it's because they're used to rigid meal patterns of 3 meals per day. Findings are less convincing when longer time periods are investigated. For example, when hunger ratings were examined over an extended period of time, such as an entire morning or day, these were unaffected by eating frequency. And also evidence from a study of Muslim women taking part in Ramadan, so where food or drink is totally restricted during daylight hours for a period of 1 month, they showed lower levels of hunger towards the end of Ramadan compared with the first few days. And this would imply some sort of adjustment in eating patterns and a reduction in appetite. The evidence for compensation of energy consumed from snacks during the next eating occasion is unconvincing. So, for example, where people are compensating by eating less at the next meal. This may depend on other factors, such as the precise timing and composition of the snack. For example, protein snack versus high-fat foods, where protein can lower your feelings of hunger. And as well as a population group under investigation. So what I mean by that is some population groups may be more accurate at compensating. So males can be better than females, children and young adults are better than adults, lean versus overweight, and unrestrained versus restrained eaters. Long-term adjustment in energy intake over several days may occur, but again, with this area, more research is needed before any conclusions can be made. Snacking and cognitive function. There is a limited amount of research that has investigated the effects of snacking on cognitive function, but it is now well recognised that breakfast is beneficial as opposed to skipping it, because it can have a positive effect on cognitive performance, especially in children with no nutritional status. So it's important that you have your breakfast before school. The beneficial effects are thought to be due to the increased availability of glucose, and this is because glucose is the primary source of energy for our brain, and an inadequate supply may lead to impaired cognitive function. Studies suggest that increased eating frequency and snacking may be beneficial for cognitive function, memory and mood, and it does this by counteracting the decline in cognitive function found after a meal, and this is typically observed 1 to 3 hours after a meal, so the post-lunch dip. So for example, one study showed that a carbohydrate snack, 25 grams of cornflakes with milk, given 1.5 hours after breakfast, improved mood and cognitive tasks. Another study found that snacks, so confectionery or fruit-flavoured yogurt, provided in the afternoon, improved both memory and attention compared with a calorie-free beverage. And another study showed that energy intake in the form of a milkshake, spread over 4 intake occasions, so every 2 hours, had a more positive impact on verbal reasoning, accuracy and speed, such that errors were reduced by 30 to 40% compared to when energy intake was spread over 2 occasions. However, improvements in cognitive function can differ between studies. For example, the timing of snacks, the carbohydrate load given, the population group, and the type of cognitive test covered in terms of the research. Again, more research is needed to confirm these findings and to understand the timing of intake and snack composition, how it modifies any of these potential effects. Because children have larger and more active brains and a higher rate of glucose utilization compared to adults, they may benefit more from snacking. What part do snacks play in our healthy diet? There's currently no UK guidance on healthy snacking, but snacks can come from any of the food groups in the Eat Well plate, preferably from the 4 main food groups. Snacks can potentially make a beneficial contribution to the diet. There is no evidence that snacking leads to poor nutrient intakes, and some that indicates that it may actually be beneficial. Energy-dense snack foods should be eaten in restricted amounts for most people. So the key message is on snacking that we can get the balance right. There's no agreed definition, so that makes the research findings difficult to interpret. Snacking can make a positive contribution to our diet, There's no conclusive evidence that snacking has a negative impact on body weight or health. There's some evidence that snacking may have some beneficial effects, and snacks can be part of a healthy, balanced diet, but it depends what you choose and whether you compensate in terms of your energy balance, so at the next meal. Moving on to the next section of the talk, talking briefly about hydration. In June of this year, we published a paper in Nutrition Bulletin, Improving Hydration in Children, a Sensible Guide, available at the link below. So prior to the publication of this paper, we previously published a review, Hydration and Health. This review led to the development of a healthy hydration guide for adults. And following on from this adult guide, we recently teamed up with the Natural Hydration Council to provide advice on healthy hydration in those aged 4 to 13 years. And this led to the Healthy Hydration Guide for Children, which I'm going to talk about. The aim of this guide was to provide sensible guidelines about approximate amounts that children should drink and the most appropriate drinks that they should consume. So before we talk a bit about hydration, we need to understand why we need water. Well, it makes up a huge part of our bodies. In terms of our saliva, water is a key component in saliva. It helps us to swallow. Excretion, it gets rid of waste products by our kidneys and urine production. In terms of sweating, it's for body temperature and regulation. In terms of our tears, it helps to lubricate our eyes. Our joints, it forms a synovial fluid. And in cerebrospinal fluid as a cushion for the nervous system, as well as in terms of chemical reactions in our bodies. In terms of hydration in children, the body water content of newborns is approximately 75%, and this decreases with age to about 60%, so in older children and adults. Children are much less heat tolerant than adults, so therefore you're much more susceptible to dehydration, especially during physical activity and in hot climates. Mild dehydration, so for example 1 to 2% loss of body mass due to fluid loss, can result in tiredness, headaches, a lack of concentration and dry skin. In terms of its importance in school children, because the brain is 73% water, poor hydration can affect its function, and dehydration can result in decreased concentration levels and lower cognitive and physical performance. Evidence has shown that children arriving at school have a hydration deficit, once they arrive they're not drinking enough fluids. So it's important in your school day to make sure that you have enough fluids. Research has shown that 60% of children arrive at school inadequately hydrated, and 71% do not drink enough fluid throughout the school day. So I hope that this makes you think a little bit more about your hydration status in the school setting. Evidence suggests that an additional glass of water, so approximately 200 ml, can significantly improve the ability in tasks that involved visual attention and fine motor skills, but this was in a quite small study. So additional fluid during the day could have a positive impact on performance. But unfortunately there are some barriers to fluid intake, so for example it's not cool or fashionable to drink water. And in some cases in your school day it may be difficult to access water. Also as well, consumption may not be actively encouraged, and there may be concerns about trips to the fountain or to toilet breaks. So how much do you actually need? Well, this is information from EFSA that indicates that you need range from 1.3 litres per day to 2.5, depending on your age. So it's about 6 to 8 glasses of water per day. And the research in our area led to the development of the Healthy Hydration Guide that is shown here now. In terms of the development of this guide, suitable drinks were considered in accordance with dental guidelines, so looking at dental health, and caffeine and acidity content of the different drinks, as well as the presence of essential nutrients. So these were specifically considered in terms of developing a guide for children. And the key messages in the guide are in order of how they appear: to drink plenty of water, to have milk regularly, to have fruit juices in moderation, can have smoothies once a day, have low-calorie soft drinks just occasionally, have soft drinks containing sugar just occasionally, and of course to have tea and coffee just occasionally in terms of the caffeine content. And this guide is available at the link below. Some of the tips to keep hydrated in your school day: to ensure that you have a drink before school, for example with breakfast, and before and during playtime. To offer drinks regularly, so for example water, milk, juice, low-calorie drinks. To ensure that drinks are always available during your school day. and to also think about the foods that can contribute to your fluid intakes, and to always take a water bottle with you to school or in terms of activities. In terms of more information about hydration and health, Nutrition Bulletin published a virtual issue on hydration and health this year, and this is available on our website, Nutrition Bulletin website. And within this virtual issue, we have 13 different articles that may be of interest to you in terms of hydration and health, the review that I spoke of, and the resource, where the resource came from in terms of that paper. Other supporting resources that we have available on our website include the original Healthy Hydration Guide for adults, a poster for school children in terms of are you drinking enough water, information from our conference on hydration, podcast, interviews with the experts, and lastly the Healthy Hydration Guide. In terms of anything else, if you need any other information, please feel free to go to our website. Thank you.